I've always thought the worst thing a parent could experience was losing a child. I never considered what it might feel like to lose one while still watching him walk around, smile, and speak while knowing something else was looking back at you from his eyes. My son Matthew was 6 when this began. We had moved into a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town, a place where the houses were spaced far apart and the nights fell heavier than anywhere else I'd lived. Our backyard backed onto a stretch of woods, and at its center was an old playground, rotting away in the weeds. A rusted swing set, a slide with a bend in its middle, and a merry-go-round frozen stiff with time. The neighbors never talked about it, except to say it was for the kids who used to live here. When I asked what that meant, they just looked away. The first time I noticed something was wrong was when I woke around 2 in the morning and found Matthew's bed empty. Panic surged through me like a flood. I tore through the house before I saw him through the back window, standing in the yard, his pajamas pale in the moonlight, staring toward the trees. By the time I got outside, he was walking slowly into the woods. "Matthew!" I hissed, trying not to wake the neighborhood, though every instinct in me wanted to scream. He didn't answer. I grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. His face was calm, dreamy almost, as though he'd been sleepwalking. When I asked what he was doing, he only said,
"I want to play."
I brought him back inside. My wife said it was probably sleepwalking, but I couldn't shake the unease. Still, we locked the doors, hid the keys, and hoped it was an isolated incident. It wasn't. For the next 3 nights, at almost exactly the same time, Matthew slipped away. No matter how carefully we locked the house, he found his way outside, through a window, an unlocked latch, once even squeezing through the dog door, always heading toward the woods, always toward that playground. On the 5th night, my wife and I followed him. The forest was silent, except for the crunch of his bare feet in the leaves. He walked with purpose, like he knew the path, though we had never let him explore it. The trees thinned, and the playground appeared ahead, illuminated by a sickly silver moon. And he wasn't alone. Children stood among the rusted equipment. Their clothes were decades out of date, dresses with frills, suspenders, tattered jackets. Their skin was pale, some bruised and hollowed as if the years had sucked the life from them. They didn't move until Matthew stepped into their circle. Then all at once, their heads turned toward him. My wife stifled a gasp. The children gathered around Matthew, singing in voices too low for us to hear. Their faces glowed faintly in the dark, and I realized with horror that I'd seen some of those faces before, in missing child posters, years old, long forgotten. One girl with hair matted to her skull touched Matthew's hand. My son smiled at her like he'd known her forever. "Matthew," my wife whispered, "come here, baby, please." He looked at us then, and for a moment, I thought he'd run back. Instead, he tilted his head, as if listening to someone else, and said,
"They want me to stay and play."
The circle tightened around Matthew as the children pressed closer, their eyes gleaming with something unnatural. My wife stepped forward, but I held her back, every instinct screaming that if we broke that circle, something worse might happen. One of the children, an older boy with a sunken chest, lifted his gaze to us. His lips moved, though no sound came. Then, as if a gust of wind passed through the trees, all of them vanished. Except Matthew. He stood alone on the cracked pavement, tears sliding down his cheeks. We rushed to him, scooping him into our arms, but he didn't speak again that night. The next morning, he was different. His laugh sounded hollow, like it came from somewhere else. He stopped eating his favorite foods, stopped watching his cartoons. Sometimes I caught him staring at the woods with his lips moving silently. When I asked who he was talking to, he said,
"My friends, they need me."
We tried therapy, church, even medicine. Nothing changed. His drawings at school turned into depictions of the playground filled with smiling, skeletal children. One night, I woke to find him standing over me, his face inches from mine. His eyes were wide, unblinking.
You shouldn't have taken me away. They said I can come back when you're gone.
Now I don't sleep. I sit awake listening for footsteps in the hall, waiting for the moment my son finally chooses the playground over us. Because I know what will happen when he does. He won't come back. I should have never come to babysit Carl that night, but my sister begged and I never could say no. 7 years old, soft-spoken, pale, with hair that always fell into his eyes. I thought I knew him. I thought I understood him. I was wrong. It began with small things. Shadows that didn't match his body, twisting and stretching while he played. His toys sometimes moved on their own, sliding across the floor or toppling over as if pushed by invisible hands. I laughed at first, trying to convince myself it was my imagination, but when Carl's reflection in the hallway mirror smiled before he did, I stopped laughing. By dinner time, his skin had taken on a grayish pallor. He refused to eat, and his eyes, the soft brown I remembered, was gone, replaced with a yellowed, glassy sheen. I asked him what was wrong, and he turned to me slowly, his jaw stretching far too wide, teeth sharp and uneven, as if his mouth had grown while I wasn't looking.
I'm fine,
he said, but it wasn't his voice. It was low, guttural, broken. I froze. A lamp tipped over, clattering to the floor, and I realized the room had grown impossibly cold. Not like winter, but like something had sucked the warmth out of the air. Carl's form shifted as I watched. His arms elongated, and his fingers fanned out, claws scraping the floorboards. His legs twisted like knotted rope, thin and sinewy. Yet through it all he maintained that horrible, childish grin. I backed away, and he followed with movements that shouldn't have been humanly possible. He crawled along the wall, then dropped to the floor. The skin along his arms peeled in thin, translucent layers, revealing dark, pulsing veins underneath.
I like it when you watch,
He said, the words emerging with a wet tearing sound from his stretched lips. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. He shrieked, but it wasn't the shrieking laugh of a child. It was high-pitched and broken, layered with something deep and cruel. He charged, moving faster than any child should, his limbs bending like marionette strings gone mad. I swung the knife, barely grazing him. The metal bent against his chest, as if striking wet rubber, and a thick black liquid oozed from the wound, burning the floor beneath it. Carl's eyes snapped back to normal, and for a second, I thought it was over. His skin smoothed, and his limbs returned to their proper length. He smiled sweetly, small and innocent, and whispered, "I'm okay." But it wasn't over. His body suddenly convulsed violently, bones popping and reshaping audibly. His skull elongated, splitting at the top like a cracked egg, and two twisted horns erupted, curling backward. His teeth multiplied, rows upon rows glinting in the dim light. The boy I knew was gone. In his place was something monstrous, crawling and hungry. I fell back, sliding across the kitchen floor. Carl moved with jerky, unnatural precision. His hands flattened and stretched into grotesque paddles, smacking against the walls and leaving deep gouges. His legs bent and snapped like twigs, folding under him, then springing him forward with speed. I grabbed a chair and swung it like a bat. It hit his chest with a sickening crack. For a moment he froze, then reformed. The flesh stitched itself back together like wet clay, bubbling and writhing, leaving raw, glistening patches. His eyes met mine, and he grinned, wide and cruel, saliva dripping from the countless teeth. I realized then that I couldn't save him. Not physically, not with anything in this world. This thing had consumed him, remade him. He turned his head slowly, and I swear I saw the bones beneath his thin skin shift, rearranging themselves in a mockery of human form. He lunged at me. I fell backward, knife raised, eyes wide with terror. I don't know how long I fought, or if it was even a fight. The room became a blur of twisting shadows and grotesque contorting limbs. He laughed, screamed, and cried all at once, each sound a different part of his mutilated body producing it. Finally he stopped. I looked up and he crouched in the corner, human again, almost. His hair was matted, skin pale, lips trembling like he was tired, sad, or pretending. The horror in his eyes was gone, or hidden. He smiled a tiny, fragile smile and said,
I'm okay now.
I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold him and protect him, but I couldn't because I had seen what he could become. I had seen what waited inside him, patient and hungry. And I knew that when his parents came home, he'd be perfect again, smiling, innocent, and small. When my sister came home, I was still in shock and couldn't even begin to explain what had happened. I just wanted to get out of there. As I left, I caught one last glimpse of Carl, his fingers twitching, elongating just slightly, just enough to remind me that the thing inside was still there. I never believed in wishes. Not when I was a kid, not when I grew up, and certainly not when I became a father. Wishes were for fairy tales, and fairy tales always felt like lies told to keep children hopeful in a world that wasn't built for them. But my son proved me wrong. It started on his 7th birthday. We had a small party at home, just a cake, a few balloons, and my wife doing her best to keep things cheerful. I'll admit, I wasn't much of a father. I was angry more often than not, drunk most nights, and harsher with my boy than I should have been. The look in his eyes sometimes, it cut deeper than any words could. He looked at me like I was a stranger he hated. That night, after the guests had gone and the candles were lit on his cake, we sang. He sat there quietly, waiting for the song to end. Then I told him to make a wish. He squeezed his eyes shut, leaned forward, and blew. All 7 flames died in a single breath. I laughed and clapped, though something in his expression unsettled me. He didn't look joyful. He looked satisfied. Later that night, I left the house to buy another pack of cigarettes. On my way back, my car skidded on a patch of wet asphalt. I don't remember much after that, just headlights, a sharp pain, and the crunch of metal. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the middle of the road, staring at the wreck of my own car. Firemen were pulling a body from the driver's seat. My body. My son, miles away, was smiling in his sleep. I don't know how to explain what happened to me. I wasn't in heaven or hell, just here bound to the house, unseen and unheard. My wife cried for weeks after the funeral. My boy never shed a tear. He only stared at the cake topper, running his finger over the small wax candle. On his 8th birthday, the tradition repeated. My wife baked a cake, she lit 8 candles, and my son closed his eyes, whispered something under his breath, and blew. The next morning, my wife never woke up. I tried to scream, to shake her, to stop whatever force had taken her, but my hands passed right through her. She lay still, her chest unmoving, eyes glazed. My boy walked into the room, saw her body, and didn't scream. He only said, "It worked again." The police called it a heart attack. She'd been healthy all her life, but they didn't question it too deeply. People die unexpectedly every day. But I knew. God help me, I knew. I watched him grow colder. By the time his 9th birthday arrived, there was no joy left in him. Just a ritual, a cake, candles, a whispered wish. That year, it was his grandmother who died, slipped down the stairs and broke her neck. He barely reacted. He just scraped another mark into the wall beside his bed. I begged him not to keep doing it. I shouted at him, though he couldn't hear me. Tried to block the candles, though my ghostly hands couldn't touch them, but every year, he made another wish. Every year, another relative, another neighbor, or another friend of the family died. By the time he turned 15, the house was nearly empty. No aunts, No uncles, no cousins. He had carved them all away with his breath. His foster parents tried to help, but they never lasted long, only until his next birthday. He didn't smile anymore. He didn't play or laugh. He just waited, year after year, for the next chance to light the cake. With me trapped in this limbo, forced to watch, I began to realize the truth. He wasn't wishing for their deaths. He was wishing for something darker, something that whispered to him in the silence after the flames went out. It wanted him alone. On his 18th birthday, he sat in the dark with the cake in front of him, 18 candles burning like a funeral pyre. He didn't invite anyone. There was no one left to invite. I hovered near him, desperate to stop him. "Don't do it," I pleaded, though he couldn't hear. He leaned forward, eyes glinting with that same satisfaction I'd seen when he was 7. And then, for the first time, he spoke aloud, as though answering someone I couldn't see. "Yes, I'll make the last wish." He blew. Every candle died, and the world went dark. I don't know how long it's been since then. There's no day, no night, only a silence so deep it presses against me like water. I wander through nothingness, searching for my son, but all I find are whispers, the same ones he must have heard all those years. Then finally, in the suffocating dark, I saw him. My son stood before me, holding a candle that flickered on an invisible cake, his face pale and hollow. "It's your turn now," he whispered, holding out the flame that burned without heat. I tried to pull away, but the darkness pressed in, and I knew that when I blew that candle out, my son would be the last one to die. I still remember the day I first saw him. It was raining, the kind of rain that soaks through your coat and settles into your bones. I had just moved into the old row house on Granger Street, a place I got cheap because it was haunted, according to the agent. I laughed it off at the time. Haunted houses were for movies, but I guess I should have paid attention. I was unpacking boxes in the living room when I noticed him, a young boy standing at the top of the stairs, small and pale, maybe 7 or 8. His clothes were wet, clinging to him like seaweed. His dark eyes, too old for a child, bore into mine, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond, just watched. I went closer, trying to convince myself he was a neighbor's kid who had wandered in. "Hey, are you lost?" Still nothing. He tilted his head in a strange motion, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. The rain pattered on the windows behind him, but there was a silence around him that swallowed the sound. Then he spoke.
"They told me to wait."
"Wait for what?" I asked. He stepped down the stairs, slowly dragging his bare feet across the wood floor, and I noticed there were no wet footprints behind him. Not one.
"They'll come. They always come if I leave."
I took off my jacket and offered it to him, and went to get a towel.
"No, I have to wait."
"Wait where?" I asked, though a part of me didn't want to hear the answer. He didn't respond. Instead, he ran to the corner of the living room and pressed his small face against the wall. I walked over, and when I reached out, my fingers brushed the plaster. The wall was freezing. Not just cold like a draft, but bone-deep, unnatural cold. "You're cold," I murmured. "Let me put a towel around you."
They said I have to be cold, and I have to keep waiting.
"Who said?"
You don't hear them?
"I hear nothing," I said. And suddenly I did hear it. Not a sound at first, more of a vibration, a pulse, a subtle hum, low and steady like a heartbeat. It filled the room, creeping under the floorboards, up the walls, and behind my eyes. Then the temperature dropped, and the rain outside sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls, moving in ways that defied logic, and I realized something terrifying. The boy wasn't casting a shadow. "I should call someone," I said, fumbling for my phone.
They won't help.
He said, stepping closer. His small hand reached for mine, and I felt the cold sear my skin. It was like touching ice that had been soaked in darkness. My vision blurred for a second, and I saw them, shapes flickering in the corners of the room, too fast to see clearly, but human enough to make my heart hammer, faces twisted and shifting.
They'll take me if I move. You have to let me wait.
The boy said, almost pleading. I tried to pull away, but it was like the air itself thickened, pressing against me. His small hand gripped mine tighter than he should have been able to, and then I saw, behind his eyes, the faint shimmer of thousands of eyes, all watching me.
And now you have to wait too.
Panic surged through me. I shoved him away, stumbled back, and screamed into the empty house, but the walls swallowed it. The room twisted, shadows melting into shapes, forms that shouldn't exist. And I realized I couldn't leave. I woke the next morning on the stairs, drenched and shivering. The boy was gone, but my hand still tingled where his cold grip has clasped me, and a hum lingered in my skull. I told myself it was a nightmare, but every time I go to the corner of the living room, I feel him there, waiting, and sometimes in the dark, I hear him whisper,
They'll come if you leave. You have to wait.